And with that, let's start the conversation. We're doing 2 quick panels. Our first panel, we have Ted Dabrowski, the president of WirePoint, Rosita Chatonda, a veteran teacher and a candidate for school board, and Corey Brooks, pastor and the leader of the organization hosting us tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. So welcome all. Ted, I'm going to start with you because as the research guy, you're the number guy, you're passing out these wonderful little pamphlets, holding up so everyone can see. So let's just talk about the numbers. If you get a chance, they can put up some of the slides that you presented. So I said that education is failing, so just how bad are things?
And thank you all for being here. Ted Dabrowski from WirePoints. Thanks for having me and having us up here talking about this issue. You know, I never understood. I've been working in education, finance, and looking at government numbers for the last 15 years. And I looked at education more from a spending perspective. But just a few years ago, I started looking at the actual results. And my colleague John Klinger and I was here. The first time we started writing some results piece was when we talked about, we couldn't understand it. There was something like 85%, Lori Lightfoot was bragging about this, 85% of Chicago public schools kids were graduating, and yet when we looked at the kids who could read at grade level, who were proficient in reading, it was only 25%. So we said, well, how does that work? If kids can't read at the right level, how are they graduating? And as we dug more, we found out that those were actually good results. Once we scratched a little further, we found out that kids in certain neighborhoods, hardly any kids could read at grade level. In some schools in Chicago, 0 kids can read at grade level. We said, well, how the heck does that happen? Does anybody care? So we started laying out these facts, and let me just give you a few. Of the black children at CPS, only 17 out of every 100 kids can read at grade level. That means that 83 can't read at grade level. How do we want our kids to succeed if they can't read? For math, it's even worse. And it's no different for Hispanics. Now look, there's not many white kids left at CPS. It's only about 10%. So it's largely the black children, the Hispanic children. So if we care about making that work, we're going to have to do a lot. Now, there's another little thing that we saw. For me, what matters most is if a kid can't read in 3rd grade. Because if you can't read in 3rd grade, guess what? You're not going to be able to do science in the 4th and social sciences in the 5th. You're in trouble. And then by the 8th grade, guess what? You're acting up because you can't read. And then you have a big hill to climb. Well, we started looking at these results, and I've got here on this piece of paper math results. In the 3rd grade, just 11% of black children could do math at grade level. In the 4th grade, it's just 7%. In the 5th grade, 6%. It never gets better. By 11th grade, just 8% can do math at grade level. What happened to teaching kids? The system is just moving them through grade by grade. They don't care, and then they graduate them. And parents don't really know what's going on because, you know what? They see their kids go to the next grade. They assume things are fine. The Governor Pritzker and Pedro Martinez and others will get up there and say education is fine. Our kids are doing better. They're improving. They don't tell you what I'm telling you. And by the way, this isn't WirePoint's data. This is the city of Chicago's data. This is CPS data. It's state data, straight from the education board. So they're not even willing to tell the truth with their own data. Now here's the scary part, and here's why kids get into trouble. Last year, 11% of the juniors who took the SAT, black students, were proficient in reading, and yet 79% graduated. And for Hispanics, there's 18% Hispanics were at grade level, and they graduated 84. And the sad part is if you hear Pedro Martinez and others talk about this, they're celebrating the graduation rate, not telling you, the parents, that your kids can't read right. And many of them can't read. They're way behind. It's not like they're 1 grade behind or 2 grades behind. They're 3 and 4 and 5. So I'm going to leave it there.
Right, that's
It's not good.
right. So, Rosita, as a teacher, a lot of people hear the numbers and they just think, especially when you talk proficiency, I don't know what that means. What does that really mean? So talk about what those numbers mean in the classroom, both from what that means the kids are producing and how you go about trying to manage that and teach it in that classroom.
Okay, so one of the things I'd like to do is just address the data. And like you said, what does that mean? It means different things to different communities. And so when we're looking at the data, we're looking at it from the prism of white mainstream America and testing. So a lot of people say that the test instrument may be biased. It probably is, but I've learned over the course of the years, it doesn't matter if it's biased, our children still have to pass. And so I take that approach. I have took that approach during my career. So one of the things I want to talk is why this data looks like this. And if you'll notice, those of you who went through Chicago public schools, I went to school through Catholic school, but many of you went to public school. And you know that you learned how to read, write, spell, and everything. And most of you have jobs as a result. Something happened about 25 years ago when Mayor Daley took control over the schools. And he said he wanted to run it as a business. Now, what does that mean? It means that computer technology is going to really be the teacher. So they remove spelling, phonics, penmanship. As we talk about penmanship, they're trying to put it back. A lot of our seniors can't sign their name. They never learned it in school. And what stuck out in my mind was I remember being in a classroom teaching a 5th grade when they came in and confiscated the spelling books. And I'm like, what in the world? And we had to pack them up or else couldn't use them anymore. So with the removal of the literacy supports, it has the greatest impact on Black children because if we back up a little bit, we speak a dialect of English. Most Black people do. I do. We speak a dialect of standard English. The assessments are written in standard English, not a dialect. So if Black children are coming to school and you're not teaching them spelling, phonics, where do they learn standard English? They're not speaking it at home. In some cases, the teachers are not speaking it. Where are they going to learn how to speak standard English? Now, if I can't understand the language on the test, I can't pass the test. That is what is going on with our students. And I found that out by being in the classroom through trial and error, understanding that we talk about the literacy gap, and we'll come back to that. So I did my dissertation, I finished my doctorate, and what did I study? For the last 20 years, that's been plaguing me. How can we help? How can we equalize education for poor Black children who are descendants of slavery, who learn how to speak through the oral tradition, who it's passed down generationally, and now they're not learning the language in school and they don't understand. Add to that, and then this last point, the United Negro College Fund did a college readiness survey. And what they said was in the last 20 years, Hispanics have outpaced Black children in the double-digit numbers in terms of learning for college readiness. Now, we noticed that here the Hispanics are doing about the same as Blacks, but by the time they get to college, they have mastered 2 languages, Spanish and English, and that's due to the ESL and the E, where they get additional language support when they're immigrants. Jaquan gets nothing. He gets nothing.
We'll have to come back to that, and I'm sure people are going to want to comment on that. Corey, what does it look like as someone who's in the community trying to help people and dealing a lot with young kids, but a lot of teenagers and people that made it out of school and had to deal with some of these numbers. How does that affect how you help them, what you see, and what that impact has been on education?
So, during COVID, we became really aware of issues pertaining to our children knowing how to read. My son decided that we were going to change the sanctuary to a place where kids could be dropped off during COVID because CPS was out of school. And so we would have from day to day from 25 to 50 students in here. And we quickly noticed, first of all, no one was on the computers. They were having these classes, and you would see in some classes 4 or 5 students in the class. Then we noticed not only did we have poor attendance during COVID, but we started providing like reading activities, and we quickly noticed the kids could not read at all.
And how old were
Not
the
even
kids?
sight words. These were kids probably from 2nd all the way through 8th grade, and they just basically could not read. We also noticed that we were experiencing a large amount of dropouts, black boys, at 9th grade. So at 9th grade, a lot of young black boys were dropping out of school. When we started trying to figure out what was going on, we realized that quickly we were having some serious issues. And so we started looking at the data. And one of the things that we realized that even with the schools in our area, we had a 4% reading proficiency, a 6% math proficiency, which means only 4 kids out of every 100 were reading at grade level. Only six children at grade were doing math at grade level. And we also realized that some of our most violent children are the ones who are educationally behind, especially the boys. And so one of the things that we are experiencing every single day with the work that we do is that we're trying to figure out ways to help young people to just simply be able to read. And what breaks my heart is that I think our culture, our community, does not understand, for whatever reason, the magnitude of the problem that we are faced with. And the very fact that this room isn't packed with people being concerned about the education of our children speaks volumes. And so we are facing so many issues in our community, but most of those issues are directly tied to the education of our young people. They can't even, they can't read.
And that brings up 2 interesting points. One, as a teacher, Rosita, I want you to talk a bit about how that becomes difficult. A lot of people beat up on the teachers and say we need better teachers. And I mean, that's maybe true like in any other profession. But look at what they're managing. You have kids in a classroom, some have discipline problems, some are on a grade level. Even if you have no discipline problem, you're trying to teach multiple kids at multiple grade levels and trying to balance that. So talk about how that may hinder the ability to get more of them up to grade level. And then the other piece is you talk about the testing. And you made a point, it's not like you said it, but you did mention the point that some people question the testing and say it may be biased, which I give everyone an argument. I don't know, it could be intentional or it could be, have a slight bias even if it's not intentional. But what we do know, you in the classroom, what he's seeing, you've already established the fact that there is a proficiency issue. So we know we need to move beyond, like you said, whether the test is biased or not, and we need to help kids, right?
Exactly. And in the classroom, I tried to figure it out because I was always solution. I came into education with the idea. I have 4 children. They went to the lab school. They went to Mount Carmel. And I wanted the same thing for my students, the same kind of education that my children had experienced. So when I went in, I realized that working with the kids, we talked about that when I would give them an assignment and we would talk, they would do very well. And then when I would give them a standardized test, they would fail. So I began to interpret the language to the students and say, this is what they mean, and this is how we do it in our community. Then one year, I started getting 1 year's growth, and I was a math science person, and I was getting the highest gain in reading. Up to 1 year, I had 4 years growth with some of my students. So I decided to move further, and I took Madison School, which is on 76, as a lead teacher. And this is why I know it can be done. We got the school off probation when I got using this strategy of just explaining to our children what the language means. This is so important, it's so simple. And I had to figure it out myself as a classroom teacher. And when we do this, and what we ask is that Black children need the same kind of support that the immigrants have when they come here. They don't speak English, but they get additional help in 2 languages, and then they're bilingual. So that's one of the things. So I'm talking about fixing it. We know what the problem is. Another problem is this. Non-educators took over education during the Daley era, and that was a big problem because they really thought that the computer would do all this stuff. So they removed it. Well, Microsoft Word will spell. You don't need to learn how to spell. Just get on the computer. It'll correct your grammar. You don't need to know how to. I mean, this is actually the logic and the rationale they told us for removing the literacy support. Now, the only way we're going to get that fix is to bring that back. We have to bring the literacy supports back. And I just ask all of you, imagine if you were in school and you never learned spelling and phonics and penmanship. I mean, what condition would you be in? So that's the condition that our children are in, and they're struggling with that.
Right. And you all will get an opportunity to come back, answer questions, delve deeper into some of these things, but I want to say one thing to Ted. Obviously, there's a reason why we're doing this, where we're doing it. The reason why we're focusing on particular kids because they're doing much worse than others. But I can't leave out the fact that, as I said in my opening, kids are failing across the board. You as a data guy, you get this. I don't know how many of you know, you can get a map of the United States and take a dart and throw it at the map. Anywhere you hit is a pretty good chance that more than a third of the kids in that district cannot read at grade level. Rural, big city, Black, white, Beverly Hills, it does not matter. So there had to be a shift in the way they're educating people across the board. So what are you seeing in those numbers, and why do you think that it's been like that and it's getting worse from year to year?
Yeah, I think a direct answer to that question is, especially in the last 10 years or so, is with these phones, these iPads. I think they've become a huge distraction for kids of any age, any race, any income. It's problematic, and they're getting hooked. I think one of the great points you made is they don't care about spelling anymore. All those kind of things. Standards have been watered down. We're not obsessed about literacy. I often say that I would love for whoever takes over CPS next would say, we're going to do everything in our power to take the reading proficiency from whatever it is, 30% to 50% in 3 years or in 2 years, whatever it is, and hold people accountable. We've lost that ability to set the bar high and have people reach it. I do want to make one important point that, and for me, we have a systemic problem. This isn't a problem only about what's happening here, as you just mentioned, Charles. In Decatur, Illinois, right, the Black children do very poorly. But what's fascinating there is that for white children, there's 2,000 white children in the Decatur public school system. Only 12% can read at grade level. So systemically, we're destroying education and we're destroying the ability of our kids to read. On the flip side, we have some magnet schools and selective enrollment schools, of which there are lots of blacks and a lot of Hispanics, and they do really well. Take Northside College Prep. They're the Hispanics are like 90% can read at grade level, and for the blacks it's like 88%. So success can be had, and you mentioned how you improve things a lot. Success can be had, but we just have to raise the standards and I guess really flip a lot of the problems that we've created by not requiring phonics, not requiring stringent math. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Well, let's give them a round of applause. We have more talk to have, and thank you all, and they will be back. Maybe not. Thank you. So now, who do I have on my next panel? So next we have the principal of Leo, Shaka Rawls, coming up. Natasha Dunn, parent, education advocate, and another candidate for school board. And Gerald Morrow, you're so far away I didn't see you. Former principal. Why do I keep elevating everyone to president? Principal of Dunbar High School. So, I don't know, I should do this, nothing scripted. Do any of you want to comment on anything that they talked about before? I got questions, you don't have to.
So, I'm a parent. I have a set of twins that are 22 now, and my daughter who's sitting over here is 15 years old. So, as a parent who not only has raised children, and also an activist and advocate who studied CPS policy, one of the things that I've learned is that the system is broken, right? And when we look at that data that was just spoke of, I always say this: behind data, there's stories. There's numbers, and then there's humans behind that. There's experiences within the system that create that data. And I know that Rosita talked about some of it, but I want to say this. When I was a CPS student, I actually graduated from CPS. I spent from 2nd through 12th grade. During my elementary years, one of the things that was very profound for me was that whenever we took the standardized tests in math specifically, I always would say this as a young kid: this is the stuff that my teachers never taught us. That was the first thing I would say. And every year after year after year, I did horribly in math. My reading was good. I was always above average with that, but my math was horrible. When I look back at my math teacher, she also came across as a woman who had a disdain for the children she was teaching. Now, I'm 49 years old. I grew up in the 80s at a time where people claimed public schools were great. I would have to beg to differ. We did have some great black teachers in our school, but it was a lot of them who really I had teachers stand in front of the class and tell the class, we're going to get a check whether you read and learn anyway. That's one level. The second level was when I went away to college in North Carolina. My last year of college, I had to take statistics. And I was so scared to take it because I was trained to believe that I was horrible at math because of my experiences in public school. But because I needed to graduate and wanted to give my mom, my dad, and my family that experience, I took the class. It was one where students prior to me who had full ride scholarships would get C's, D's, and they flunked. But what I did was I used my reading comprehension skills. I told myself that I'm going to pass this class because I had no other choice. I thought about my mom and my dad and how proud they would be me to graduate. And I ended up getting a B out of a class that people who came into the school with a higher level did. But that was because I read and I believed in myself, right? Fast forward to being a parent. I had an opportunity to substitute teach in CPS when my children were like 2, my twins were 2. And during that experience, I saw firsthand schools in black communities that lacked resources. They lacked books, they lacked teachers and everything. My sister and I subbed, and one of the things that we would always say is we were guaranteed a job on Thursday, Fridays, and Mondays because teachers wouldn't show up. It was so bad, and this is multiple schools that we taught at, that principals would beg me to teach summer school. We had multiple schools where kids would fail the standardized test, 3rd, 5th, and 8th graders, and the whole class had to go to summer school. That was how bad it was, because CPS has a policy to retain students. Fast forward a little further, my children who grew up in a house where there's books everywhere, when I put them in CPS, my children knew how to read. I taught them. I'm a very intentional parent. And by the time my sons were in 3rd grade, one of my sons was recommended to be retained in 3rd grade. And I'm going to pause there because that's when the advocate Natasha came out. That was actually the moment when I started to study the system even further and recognize that this was a real problem, because not my child was not going to fail because Natasha took care of the babies. Natasha made sure that she read to her babies when they were in the room, in my womb. I sang to them, I did everything. ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, they knew how to read walking in the door. But what I did was I started studying the data. I started looking at the test scores. What I noticed across the board, thank you, because it's bothering me too. Across the board was that when they entered into school, their fall test scores, reading and math scores, were always above average. By the time they got to the winter scores, they started to dip. By the time it got to spring, it dipped. It consistently dipped. So they would come into the school either at or above grade level, but by the time they ended, their scores would go backwards. So I started looking at other parents. So this started making me organize parents across the city of Chicago, and I started looking at their data and noticed the same trend.
Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I really wanted to address something that was earlier about the data. The data has so many layers to it, but the truth of the matter is that the data didn't start looking like this for just particular blacks just at the pandemic. This was at Robeson, this was at Harper, this was at Marshall, this was at Crane, this was at Farragut in 2000s. So this data is nothing new. The data, the way that it looks, is nothing new. And I'll be the first to apologize as a sitting principal about why some of this looks the way that it looks. Because I'm not here to point fingers or blame anybody. But when I looked at the African American community, one of the reasons that we were successful was because we were a community. I'm gonna say that again, because we were a community. The parent was there, and even when the parent wasn't there, if it's 20 houses on the block, and you got 15 houses that are functioning, we engulfed the other 5 and those children who didn't have the supports. So when we look back at what's going on, the difference between Roseland, Auburn Gresham, and any other, Lawndale, as you look at Mount Greenwood people advocate for them. They advocate for their children. They hold teachers accountable. They protect principals. They make sure their children show up ready to learn. And they engulf the other children who need supports. So when I look at this, I look at, a lot of the language now since the pandemic is around self-care. But to have true success, we got to focus on what community care looks like. How does the community make sure it has done what it has always done in the African American community, which is what? Save each other, help each other. And I'll end it with this. I'm not going to even get into the choice conversation. But if you live on 103rd and Halsted and you're 2 blocks from Julian, and you choose to send your child to Lindblom, that don't mean you don't advocate for Julian. Right. We advocate where our children went, and our children don't, and most of us didn't live in Inglewood, but we still advocated. Back in the day, we still advocated for Julian and Corliss and Finger to get everything that it needed, so it wouldn't be inequitable. So when I look back and see, I'm not the type of person who says what somebody else did to us, because our African American history shows us what? When we stood together and we had community, we've had single parents before, we've had housing projects before, we've had gangs before. Everything that we're seeing right now, except more access to guns and access to drugs, but the other root causes, They've always been there. And there was a time we did what? With a whole lot less, we overcame them.
Yep.
So we can look at school board, we can look at mayoral control, but if we do not look inward and hold a community accountable, then we're going to be in the same space the next 25 years that we were in the last 25 years. There's no reason that selective enrollment schools became the dominant culture of CPS. We did not advocate for CTE, career technical education. A teacher is just as important as a plumber is just as important as a principal is just as important as a welder.
Oh, I'm gonna stop you that. Give him a round of applause. That was great. He made me think of Bob Woodson saying, when whites were at their worst, we were at our best. And look at where we are now. But you went to the end, you talked about plumbers are just as important. And that's interesting in the fact that in the data, one other thing, we talked about the test and whether the data's right. But one other thing, Ted talked about the graduation rate as it relates to the test scores. So of all the things you mentioned that went away, another thing is a different avenue, another path. It's like we test you, we say you're bad, we graduate you, and then we push you into college when you're not ready, and then make you take out loans for the school, and then you're really taking high school classes, right? So that is really important, and we need to put that out there, and I'm sure we'll discuss that later. But what I want to say to you, Shaka, is he talked about Mount Greenwood, he talked about what we did as a community, and he made a point about others advocating for their kids in other communities. And if you look at education nationally, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is the sense that we all have problems. I said all the kids seems to be struggling. Black kids tend to be more. But when we watch the few people talking about education in the media, they're white. It's not about whether we agree with them or not, but they see a problem in their schools and they're advocating for them, right? When the school choice has an opportunity, they take advantage of it. So we're not doing it at a large enough rate. So what do you think about him saying the community should be active in education for the whole community and look out for each other, but also being open to other options like your school?
That's a lot.
Solve it all.
So let me start by saying, being Catholic school, most of our students are free and reduced lunch. We raise all of our money. We try to make sure that if you want to go to Leo High School, you go to Leo High School. It's not about paying the money. That's not where we make our money. We go out and try to get other people money to pay our bills. So I'll say this first. I think that there needs to be probably a paradigm shift in the way we're talking about the educational system. I think we're looking at it from this kind of system that's failing. But if something that's producing a lack of success rate at 11%, that means that this 89% of the people that enter into this system aren't doing well. That means that system is structured to actually produce that. Right? So if you think about the educational system is designed, if I told any teacher, I want you to make a quiz that 89% of the kids can fail, right? And you do that consistently, you do that, you're a darn good teacher. So if you look at the system as not what it's not doing for us, but what is it exactly doing to us, then you can restructure the way we look at education across the board. And so this is, I think, fundamentally, and I will not juxtapose private schools and public schools, right? Because if you follow me on social media, you know I am the biggest fan of public schools, and I'm the biggest fan of even private schools that don't even look like mine. I'm a fan of young folks learning in the city of Chicago. That's where I stand, period. But I'll say this to say is that I've did my dissertation on an examination of Chicago public schools. That's great. But what I think that we really need to understand is that the large district like CPS cannot adhere to the wishes of its constituents across the city. The things that I need in Auburn Gresham are different from the things I need in Woodlawn, right? The things that we need in back of the yards are different than the thing that we need, in Mount Greenwood. So I think that the mere size of the district means that it's not nimble enough to supply the needs of the individuals that it serves, right? So, and again, that's not a condemnation, it's a structural flaw. Right. It's crazy how CPS, we got, 77 neighborhoods, right? We don't even have that many high schools anymore. Right? We're not even serving the neighborhoods. And if we look at the traditional schools as institutional structures that support communities, right? If you look here, I remember when, Roberson was open down the street. Everybody around here went to Roberson, or they went to Hyde Park. They split Woodlawn. They split, my neighborhood. And so if you look at the needs of each community being different and individuals that occupy those communities having different needs, then the system has to be structurally nimble enough to supply the needs for those individuals.
All right. This is fascinating to me. I got to ask a question here, though, because I part of what I'm doing is making sure, connecting what's going on outside of, the problems in Chicago, but education writ large. And what I'm hearing here is fascinating because I spend all my space in education, but it's a varied look and demographics. You know, I come here from Manhattan, and I want you all to know that outside of our neighborhoods and outside of large cities, and when you go into the suburbs, when you go into majority white, affluent neighborhoods, they talk about black students a lot. I don't know if you all know that. How many of you are surprised by that? Like a lot, like as much as you do, like a lot, right? But if you listen closely to them, on the surface it sounds good, but if you listen closely to them, what they're saying is antithetical to everything you two are saying, and you two ran schools here. So for instance, you talk about there being 77 neighborhoods, and there are not even 77 high schools. Where I'm from in New York, they're advocating for not having neighborhood schools at all, right? Because they want to get rid of neighborhood schools. The high schools are already citywide. There's been a push to make the middle schools citywide. So yeah, some kid may have to go, 12 miles on 2 trains to get to school, but we want to change the demographics. They say they're doing it to help black kids, right? If that would shock you. So Natasha, I'm on the school board in New York, parent-led community council, and so they were talking about those selective enrollment schools. You're talking about how it moved to that point. And so they have selective enrollment schools. Those schools are doing well. There's not enough black students in there. So they wanted to fix the schools by saying we need to get rid of the test and have a lottery so more black kids could get in. Now, my math says I don't know how lottery would guarantee more black students because it's random, but whatever. So I said, I'm okay with the test if you want to keep academics high, but you don't lower the standards. And if they say, well, the black kids can't pass the test, I said, okay, why don't you put the resources in the majority black schools in the other neighborhoods so their academic opportunities are better? They told me I didn't care about where black kids went to school. So the options were take a school that has 500 students, 400 some odd which are black, the rest are Hispanics, and make that school better and pour resources in to make their academics better. Or take 3 or 4 kids out of that school, put them in this school, and pat yourself on the back. Which one did you think they went with? So I'm the person that hates black kids because I want more kids to achieve. So that's the narrative that's happening around the country in the areas that aren't. And what's really odd about it is they tend to speak because there's no voice there on behalf of black parents and black teachers and black administrators saying this is what black kids need to excel. And I know both of you, and I think you too, talked about the importance of having more people in the school that looks like us. I want you to talk more about why you think that would be impactful, any of you, and why that's important. And then I'll give you my thoughts behind, how I think that would be difficult in practice as long as the people who are running the schools are managing how that happens.
I'm gonna go quickly. So I attended Leo High School, and now I'm the principal. And so I'm probably not, I don't think I'm a good principal. I think I'm authentic. Right. But there's something that the young man, I always say this, the 16-year-old boy in me sees the 16-year-old boy in front of me. Right. There's something authentic about me saying I sat in this seat. I struggle with tangents as well. I hated gym class. We had to, all the things that they're experiencing on the daily I experience. So there's something authentic about seeing somebody that they can see themselves, in. And so I think that having a cultural connection, this kind of endemic idea that you look at me in the eyes. I say good morning to my boys every morning. I do rounds and I say good morning because I want them to know that no matter what happened outside of the school, we're breaking the day new together. And so there's something authentic that can't be replicated in any other space. It has to be organic in any other spaces. And having people that look like you that deal with the same things. When I get pulled over on 79th Street, it's 10 and 2. I'm nervous. I don't care how many jobs you've had, how many degrees you have. You see blue lights, you get scared. That's just the way I've been raised. And so I think that they see themselves in me. And I think that helps us understand that schools should be these small microcosms of these kids' lives, right? They should be a terrarium in which we create our own cultural norms inside this building. We create our own sense of love. We create our own sense of understanding. We also create our own community rules. And when you violate those, you get whatever consequence. That just happens, right? And so I think that if we're deliberate and purposeful about building these institutions on a smaller scale, we just can't, 350,000 students can't be serviced in 350,000 different ways. So we pick 5 different ways and try to figure out how to cram those kids into those square pegs into those round holes. So I think we need to think about that as well.
And I just want to say, I think parents want schools that are welcoming and teach to their children's potential and not their stereotype. And oftentimes what we see in a lot of our schools that are predominantly black are that type of environment where they're being taught to a stereotype. The standards are lowered for them. One of the other things that I had observed during COVID, we had a few roundtables across the city of Chicago virtually during COVID because we understood that there was going to be a potential to really harm our community academically during this time, and we wanted to collect as much data as possible about people's experiences. And one of the things that I found out in having our virtual meetings and also sitting in meetings across the city of Chicago that CPS was having was that parents did not realize that their children were being taught years behind. There were parents who would bring home, their students were straight A students, but they were in a classroom where they were being taught 2 to 3 years behind. Right. And so what COVID did for a lot of parents who were on the internet with their children was to really open their eyes up to see that their children were not being taught, essentially. So when we look at, again, the data and the numbers and we see in these gaps, what I believe is really happening is that our kids are just being taught from a stereotypical lens instead of a lens of potential.
Go ahead.
I totally agree. What has happened, and I'm not excusing myself because I've been in education over 34 years, 20 years as a school leader, and everything that Natasha is elevating is 100% correct. But to Shaka's point first, representation matters. Black boys cannot be what they don't see. It's just simply that simple. They have to see people men who look like them. And I say this all the time, and some people say it's controversial. There is no other group or race that wants their males to be taught how to be a male by another race. But when you think about black boys, everybody goes in front of black boys except black men. Let me say that again. Everybody goes in front of black boys except black men. And even when you have these programs, the curriculum is written by people who don't look like them. The curriculum is going to force them to assimilate to a culture that is not of their culture. Yeah, they may take you to Gladys to eat, but at the end of the day, are they teaching you what you're going to see as a black man? No other group does that. It just does not happen.
I got to say something that is really important. Brian, I don't even want to interrupt the time, so you can bring them back up here, get a chair, let the rest of them come back up here. I want to hear from them. But to that point, it kind of makes me think of another thing I say all the time, because you talk about black, but you also said boys seeing men. There's a problem in education that there are no men in education anymore. There's 0 in elementary school. There's sprinkles in middle school. You might get lucky to get a couple science teachers and some leaders, but it's not just your culture. You're also raising black men, all boys, particularly black men, because they tend to have a higher percentage that are at home without a man in the house, possibly, right? And then they go to school and they're being taught, and their whole day is not around men. So that's a problem in education too, right?
The issue happens with this. When black boys go to school, outside of one who's on a college track, you destined to go to Howard, you destined to go to University of Illinois, right? The challenge is that they had a very unpleasant experience at school. In other words, it was nothing at the school that they wanted. So why should I go be a teacher? There's nothing in this space that makes me want to come back to this space. I just did some focus groups with some African American boys, and we asked them, why you guys don't want to be teachers? Why would we want to be teachers? It's nothing here for us now. What makes you think it's going to be something here for us when we become teachers? This is what they're saying. They're saying the school day does not fit them. They're saying the classes don't fit them. You know, we went belly up on selective enrollment. We created a mantra when I was at Dunbar that said college and or trade, your choice you choose. Who told this black boy that you cannot be a barber and still go to Chicago State? We told him one thing. This was not a space that was receiving of him. So as in turn, he did not want to return to this space as an adult. This is exactly what they've been telling us. It is nothing here for us now. So why do we want to come back and be a teacher? You don't adhere to any of our concerns now. So what makes me think that you're going to adhere to my concerns when I come back? This is exactly quotes from young black boys that I've done focus groups on in the last couple weeks.
And can I add to really quick, just to say
Really quick this
really
time, because
quick.
no one has been really quick.
Really quick.
You all, except for Shaka. Go ahead, quick.
I agree with him on that. I think it's very important.
That
to
was
have
quick.
people that look like you in the classroom. That's
that
not
was the whole thing?
it. And, no,
Oh.
and that one of the things that I learned throughout my journey of education with my children was that I put them in multiple scenarios, right? I've had them homeschool, I've had them private school, and I've had them African-centered black school, right? They were in multiple scenarios where they were embraced by black men, black women, who in private settings really loved on them, right? And really saw them for who they were and provided them an environment that raised the level of what the expectations were when they were in the public school. And I feel like sometimes it's limited within that area because there's a lot of people who work within public school systems that for some reason or another are mandated to really lower standards, if you will, right? And so we need to figure that out.
Okay, so if you all have any questions, you can, I'm assuming line up over here. I see a microphone. And I have a follow-up to that, but since somebody immediately had a question, I'm going to let them ask their question. You can ask a general question, or you can pick a panelist. Choose your flavor if you like.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a general question. Since it has been proven that the black male at 6 years old scored higher than any other race, but when we put them in this school system, they're in a casket or in prison. I want to know why. It has been proven that black male teachers and black teachers do better than all other teachers, but yet the Chicago public school system has fired 14,000 plus black teachers. I want to know why we are putting our kids in a school system that took out cursive, took out phonics, took out 14,000 black teachers, took out the curriculum, they gutted the whole thing, and now they're putting cops in there. It's a school to prison pipeline for the black male seed. We have the biggest prison system in the entire world. We are the only place that has a child prison. Now, my question to you is, why are we continuing to take our children and send them to a school system that is teaching them how to have anal sex, oral sex, cutting off their penis, vagina, hysterectomies, who is aborting babies for children 17 and younger without the parents' permission? And if the parents dare to say anything, the Democratic Party has voted to put them in jail.
Okay.
I'm talking about LaShawn Ford, and I know when I said Democratic Party, forgive me,
but
I meant
also
Democratic.
I want to answer the question so more people can get to answer the question. One, I'm going to let Rosita answer that question. That's teed up perfectly for her. But before that, I have to do a little audience participation without the political party part. But I have to say, of course, so I didn't mention, so I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and I moved to Chicago just before COVID. So don't think I'm Manhattan, by the way. So I find it interesting. It's like being in a foreign country. I'm listening to you all and listening to the panelists, and it makes me feel good, even though this is a bad topic, because it confirms my common sense. So I want to know if that cultural stuff she's mentioning has been in the school, because I have parents that don't like it and they push back against it. But their claim is that it's just in the suburbs and it's not really in the inner city.
Well, can I say this to you? It's global, it's not
right,
just,
but in CPS,
it's global.
No.
Yeah.
It is in CPS, but you can opt out.
Yes, sir.
You can opt out.
Yeah.
It's in charter.
It's in all the Chicago public, well, I'm not sure about charter.
I got
but
one
it's in
no.
all of
I'd
them.
like to give her a microphone. She said no. Oh, you don't do it you're in the charter and you don't do it.
It's not like that.
Okay. But Rosita,
Yeah.
what would you like to say about the teachers?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say was she's right about the purge of black teachers. I actually have a lawsuit in federal court now on behalf of the policies that got rid of black teachers. In the late 90s, the black teacher force was 18,000 to 19,000. Today it's 4,000. So we have not only lost our entire fleet of black teachers, and it's also going on nationwide. We have over 100,000 fired nationwide, 7,000 in New Orleans, Detroit, and that can go down the list. I keep the data, and it's interesting, but I do want to address what Principal Morrow said. It's time for us to look at the man in the mirror. We have some biases against poor children, especially poor black children. And we don't see them as worthy. That's why this room isn't filled. We don't see them like other people see their entire population of children and students. We have some class issues to deal with. We're so involved with us getting what we need. Poor black children are suffering and dying on the street, and half of that is because of the way the problems we have internally in our community.
Okay. Well, let me ask this question. We got a line over there, but I know that we'll get to your question in a second, but that a lot of this we've talked about, and what I like about it, this is what I was hoping, that people would be honest about what CPS did wrong, what parents did wrong. I mean, Gerald, was bold in his statement, but we have to do this all together because the public schools aren't going anywhere. We have proponents for school choice here. I think people should be able to send their kids where they want to, but right now, 96% of kids are in public school, and that's not changing tomorrow.
It is changing.
I'm sorry?
It's changing. Our kids are leaving the system.
Yeah, but
they're being homeschooled, private school, they're exiting.
Well, I get that, and they should if there's a better opportunity out there. But 2025 is not going to be 12%. It's not going to go from 97 to 12. We still have to do something about the kids that are there. And we have to be vocal. Just while we're taking the kids out of school, we can be vocal about what's going on in the schools, like all these other people are doing. But your question?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, I just want to say that all of you are correct in what you are saying. I'm a retired teacher, retired school administrator, but I just want to address a few of the things that I highlighted, and I want to start what's fresh in my mind right now. Principal Morrow, congratulations, haven't seen you in a while. Oh, my name is Ron Bellamy. Yeah, was a principal at Marshall High School way back in the day. So I just want to say that one of the reasons that the black community does not have community involvement relative to enhancing the educational process is because a lot of those parents came from a poor black educated school. That's number one, and data proves that. Number two is there's been a large disconnect going back 25 years ago when STEM, which is really good, science, technology, engineering, math, and those type of things, and they systematically and intentionally stopped teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. Data proves that. Another one, when black people, students drop out of high school, it starts in elementary school, but students do not come to school prepared to learn. Psychologically speaking, is because they are frustrated. Data has proven this. When a kid comes to school and they know they can't read, they know they can't write, they know they can't do computations, they know they cannot follow instructions because they can't read. So you put them on a computer, and the computer tells them what the answer is, and they have not developed any psychological growth. And last but not least is the curriculum. The curriculum has fell apart. The curriculum has automatically, by design, we have all these charter schools that has systematically, intentionally, and purposefully drawing the students from the public high schools, and much of those funds that were allocated for the public high schools and elementary schools are now being donated, I shouldn't say donated, but allocated to the charter school. So as a result, you have low enrollments in the public schools. When I left Marshall High School in 2009, when I retired, we had an enrollment of 1,500 students. What they have right now is less than 300 students because of the charter school.
Thank you. No,
So-
we got a long line. He said we all right. Let's keep going. He didn't have a question.
Okay, no. And last but not least, you're looking at a high school graduate, a high school dropout, I should say, that went to Parker High School in Inglewood in 1966, who went to the military, et cetera, et cetera. But I had enough basic reading and writing skills where I brought myself up when I got out of the military to do the things that I had to do educationally. But I knew how to read, I knew how to write, and when I finally decided to go to college, like this young lady said earlier, there were certain things when I was taking tests in college, that I was not taught in high school.
Thank
so
you.
I just had to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Love you. My name is Arzette James Wallace. I'm a parent. My kids have went to public, Catholic, Lutheran, charter schools. I find it difficult, how would I put it? The majority of this is what I have a problem with public schools, especially magnet schools. There should not be a magnet school. If you have funding, if Northside Prep have a $25 million science lab, Simeon should have a $25 million science lab. If you have teachers in Walter Payton and Northside Prep that are PhDs, you should have them in Simeon. The problem is they put more money in those schools because of where they're located. My child should not have to leave the south side of Chicago to go to Melrose Park to get an education. My daughter graduated from Walter Lutheran in Melrose Park. My oldest son graduated from Lincoln Park. I have one that went to Westinghouse, the other one. But their basic education was in grammar school. When you don't have phonics, how can you teach these kids? And I refuse to put them in a grammar school in our neighborhood because they was not teaching the basics, reading, writing. And my kids are 22 and 30s. So, and another problem is, how can teachers get support from parents when parents can't read themselves?
Keep going. Brian Mullins.
Hello, thank you, Charles Love, for putting this together. This is great so far. So real quick, I heard a lot of stuff from both of the first panels. It seems to keep coming back to the same issues of our community and what we are doing. And I think the problem is most of us in our community have no idea or understand how we got here, what do we do going forward. I wanted to say a couple things. I don't have a question. And so you talk about, we throw some more numbers out there. 44% of principals at Chicago Public School are black women. Okay, less than 4% of teachers are black males. So we are looking at these problems that you guys have addressed, but nobody's addressing them at any other level than this conversation right here. So we just churn the kids out year after year. You guys also touched on something. Somebody said something about race in different spaces. We have a black mayor and a black Chicago Teacher Union president. So the black face is not good enough for solutions. They need to be ingrained in our black community and tuned to black American children. And what we need is a culture to come back. So it's a culture shift for everyone. listening to this now and watching 30 years or so of these exact same conversations. You mentioned CTE. CTE is great, but if we can't get the trade unions to let our children in, it doesn't matter anyway. So you got to look at, how did this happen? It's about money. It's about politics, if we want to talk about it or not. There's a shift in our culture, in our country, away from Americans, black Americans, and for immigrants, and that's what we see like that. One more statement. I talked to somebody at CPS today who said, Brian, wait what we're coming out with in a couple of weeks. They have started to test the immigrant children in their own language. And they are finding that they are way advanced than American children. Because that means that this is a calculated plan against us in our communities. The question would be, hearing all this, for me, I know we got some candidates for school board up here. I think CPS has been deemed too big to fail, but CPS needs to be broken up because it doesn't work, and we're gonna need advocates going forward to break it up into silos that can then be forced what we're talking about in this room on our children. And what do you guys think about breaking up CPS?
I agree. I think that the system is too big. It's not focused on what it should do to educate our kids.
Natasha agrees.
All right, my question is to the principals or people who run schools of some sort. So it's around professional development training. I was a former 5th grade reading teacher on the west side of Chicago. Now I'm the dean of college counseling and an instructional coach on a high school located on the west side of Chicago. My question is, I do agree that students benefit from having teachers that look like them, who can relate to them. I grew up in Cabrini Green projects, all of that. So I agree with all of those things. But what I also know the difference between my training and my counterparts was the driving force between the academic gains that my students were able to get. I didn't get my undergrad degree in education. I went to an alternative program, but I had intensive instructional coaching throughout my whole entire year of teaching. So my question is, what are principals or school leaders doing about recruiting highly skilled teachers and getting them to stay through effective teacher development? Because although things are true, but it is a struggle to teach right into a group. I had an all boys class that were deficient, but I had to perfect my craft every day. I got people coming into my room, giving me observations, giving me research I had to read. So what does that look like for you all, and how are you working with CPS to make sure teachers are effectively trained to do their jobs?
Well, professional development is embedded in everything we do. So it's not like teachers are not getting the training that they need. Sometimes the metrics are not there that's equitable, because what we're really talking about is an inequitable system. We have just dismantled SQRP not too long ago because it did not adequately or equitably evaluate schools. So do teachers get the training? 100%, absolutely. Professional development. The challenge comes in is when you have, I think Natasha did it earlier. You're going to have 3 different levels of students in your classroom. Even at Whitney Young, you will. But if you go to Marshall and Corliss and Crane and those other places, you have 3 different levels of children who are already below level. So now, as opposed to teachers teaching to the entire class, you have to now basically teach to 3 different classes inside of one class. And that creates a lot of preparation. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just answering your question.
No, I'm saying, no, I agree. But what I'm saying is what you're speaking about, I got that training. So when I came to school, I assessed all my kids, and I had to teach 3 different classes in one classroom. But what I'm saying is my peer who taught at another school didn't have that. So they got a curriculum and a textbook, and their training was to do things one way. My training was to assess all my kids, group them by reading levels, and I taught 5 different classes in one class. So I do think people get the training. I don't think the training is standardized across schools where it's equitable for every campus, is what I'm saying.
That's the key.
Can I just make one comment?
No.
Next
question. It was for the people. I guess the people.
Okay,
Look at the
go
clock.
ahead,
Look at
go
the clock.
ahead, go ahead. It was only one. Okay.
Hi, can I go?
Yes.
Hi. First of all, my name is Ron Milner, and the reason this room isn't filled because nobody invited Sexy Red or Lil' Kim, these rappers. That's why the room's
That's
not
my
filled.
bad. That's on me.
Okay.
I got to own that.
Do better next time. First of all, I have to say I know two gentlemen on the stage here. Ted from Wire Points. I listen to him every day on the radio, every Tuesday for the past 2 or 3 years. And Principal Morrow, I know him personally because he was the principal at Dunbar. I graduated from Dunbar, but not when he was there, but I visited with him and he's helped me out in the past. The problem, first of all, is the school system in Chicago is too big. You cannot manage 600 schools and be successful at that. Also, two major problems. They've taken God out of the school. Any place where God isn't around, you're going to have problems. The first teachers of any students are their parents. I've been married for about 44 years now. My wife and I have 2 daughters. And for the past 20, 25 years, we always had dinner at the table together. I mean, you can count on your fingers the times we didn't. And it's important that men are in the house. That's important. And if we as black people don't understand what's going on, see, you know, God made us these different colors for a reason, because this is the most superficial part of who I am that you're seeing right now. The most important part of me is on the inside. And so if you want to get to know me, you're going to have to approach me. And you can't look at me by the color of my skin. One last thing I want to say. When my daughter, Jamie, came home from her first day of senior year, she said, "Dad, I met all my teachers and I'm so excited." Now, we live in Sycamore, about 90 miles west of here. And she said, "Dad, I met all my teachers, I'm so excited." And I'm like, "Jamie, I'm happy for you." And she said, "And guess what, Dad? One of my teachers is black." And I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah." And this really struck me. She said, "Dad, this is the first black teacher I've had since I've been in the school district." My heart dropped. I went back to the school board meeting a few weeks later and I ripped everybody on that school board. I said, "You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. You know, you're only hiring white teachers?" So it's bad on both sides. So we have to get better than that. And also, too, reading is fundamental. Again, I had a C+ average when I was at Dunbar. I'm not a smart person, but you know what? I can do some amazing things because I taught myself, and it can be done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to break my own rule because this is my thing. But I'm going to be quick because you talked about race, and I want to say, as several people here on the panel talked about the importance of having people in the school that look like us, and they've articulated why that would be important. What I want you all to know that's happening in the schools that are outside the community, you have a lot of, we already said a lot of women, you have a lot of white women who are teaching. And because they're pushing culture nationally, they're doing that, but obviously you say that it's better if it's done by someone who looks like us. And what they do is they do what I call drive-by culture. So they don't really teach the culture, they don't know it. So they just, stick an Indian kid in a book, stick a gay kid in a book, right? Talk about Jamal couldn't drink out of this water fountain. And they say, "Look, I'm teaching all the cultures." And you say, "You're not teaching anything," and you ask why. They say, "Because everyone needs to be seen in the book." So it becomes not about anything in depth about any of the students. It just becomes about this watered down version of, we checked the box and we did this. And it seems to be doing more harm than good. Next person.
Well, now I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Go.
I'm Dr. Eric Wallace. And I hear you talk about people looking like you, but I'm wondering if there's any data that says black kids do better if they have a black teacher.
Yeah.
Or,
Absolutely.
Let me finish my question. Because I think, look, black male teachers. Well, I would even say, I think they have to be equality teachers too. Because there are some black teachers that are terrible as well.
Yes.
So it's not just about the color of your skin. It's got to be about a teacher who cares, know the subject matter, and they care about their students. That's where I think it comes up. Both my parents were educators. I did some teaching. And I say this because I was in an all-black environment in the city of Chicago. My parents moved us out of Chicago into a predominantly black area, into a predominantly white area. We moved to Wilmette, where I was the only black kid in the school. But that didn't change how I was taught or educated. My grades didn't go down, and I had to understand that we live in a predominantly white culture. So you've got to be able to know how to function in that culture. And I think a lot of times, some of the black stuff we call culture gets taught to us at church and in our own families. So I see you acting like I need to go, but I just want to throw it out there. There got to be some data. I don't know who's got the data, but that shows that if we have, it can't be just, I don't believe that it's just black teachers. It's got to be black teachers that are good at what they do, love to teach.
Right.
You know,
I know all of you want to jump on that and explain what the data goes over. You heard my alarm go off, but I do want you to respond. But I want you to respond because we really want to talk about solutions for the last few minutes. And if assuming that you're right, that matters and that's a good thing to do, how do we, you, Shaka, all of you, how do we functionally do it when we already have a teacher shortage in general? There are already no men in the schools in general, and there are not enough black teachers out there. So if the goal is to get better quality teachers, more of them, and more black men in the schools, how do we even find them?
The first thing you have to do is start with intentionality. This has to be what your agenda becomes. For example, I knew I didn't have black teachers at Dunbar, and I'm very careful with teaching our black boys to assimilate. So when I say representation matters, I was stating that they were quality people and quality teachers. Because it does nobody any good to put anybody in front of anybody that's not of quality. That's the first thing. But I'm real careful about teaching them our culture. Our culture needs to be embedded in everything that is in this world. It should not be unintentional. It should not be oops. Right, but to answer your question, where's the intentionality around it? There should be an uproar of lack of black male teachers. There should be an uproar by our community of creating pipelines to make this work. What are we doing intentionally with Chicago State? What are we doing intentionally with UIC? One of the things I did at Dunbar, I went down to Grambling, I went down to UAPB, I went down to Jackson State, I went to Howard. Why? To make sure I can go get the apple off the tree to make sure they can come to our schools so our children can see people who actually look like them. So you have to be, the thing is, you have to be very intentional about it. Last but not least is this. Our black boys have to be, it has to be intentional in the schools so they can see the value of going to be a teacher once they grow up and graduate from college and want to come back and be a teacher. Schools has to show them something that they want to see. There are going to be boys from Leo who will want to go back to Leo strictly because of Shaka.
Right, I believe that.
That's why they're going back. Because they saw somebody look like him of value. Then they aspire to be that. So when I talk about representation matters, they cannot be what they do not see. We have to make sure a quality girl needs to see a quality black girl. A black girl needs to see a quality black woman in front of her. It don't change. It does not change. They need to see people who look like them of quality doing a high quality job so they can aspire to be that. But if they don't see it, why would I even go back to that space where there's no representation?
So I want to say this, I want to have Ted talk about school choice, and I know Shaka's here from Leo, but I don't know what everybody's view, we didn't get to that, what their views on choice is, but it seems to me that you can push out of every angle because schools are bad, we need to try everything. So you can try to push CPS to do that, but at some point, doesn't school choice afford you the opportunity to open black-focused schools? So is that could that be a benefit to another way to solve some of those things through choice?
20 years ago, 30 years ago, you have more principals right now, and I know from Corliss, Julian, Finger, Harlan. They didn't go to Whitney Young. They didn't go to Kenwood. They went to basic neighborhood schools. You know why? The first thing is that it was a comprehensive school. It had AP, it had CTE, it had general education. It had everything in it. But you know why it was in it? Because the community advocated for it. The community said, I am not sending my child all the way across town. You are going to put in this school what my community said it wanted. And they did. And they did. I grew up 2 blocks from Julian. Julian had AP. Julian had CTE. Julian had general education. It was a true comprehensive school. And kids went to college and they graduated and they did well. And they did not have to leave their community. So we don't have to have choice. we have to have advocacy for make sure that this school community has everything it's supposed to have. And when we do that, you don't have to go across town to get a so-called quality education. You can get it right inside your community. When we closed our mouth, somebody else opened theirs. And that's why you leave Roseland to go all the way to Lincoln Park, because we did not say anything.
Let me just change the subject just a little bit on school choice. I've heard a lot of people, including me, talk about how the system doesn't deliver for the parents here and for the kids. The system is too big, it needs to be broken up. There's all kinds of thoughts about that. One thing that's happening across the country is school choice, and that's the power, the power for parents to choose a better school than the one they're in if they want to, and that's through a voucher or through an education savings account. In Iowa last year, or this year, any kid, doesn't matter what color, how much income they have, they can choose, they can get a voucher, an education savings account, and go to another school. The voucher is about $7,800. They can grab that and go, no limits. Same thing is happening in Indiana. Same thing is happening in Iowa, in Florida, in Arizona. Why do those parents in those states, any parent there, have the choice to send kids to another school that works better for them? And why don't you have that power? Why do we empower the unions? Why do we empower the school administrators, those with all the power and all the money? Why do they get to choose everything and you don't? What we need is a school choice program that puts the power in your hands and out of the union's hands and out of the powerful. And so that's what we need to move to, school choice.
I want to say something about that because I think there's a lack of education and understanding what vouchers are, what school choice is, the difference between charter, like we talked about vouchers, public schools. As a candidate for the elected school board, one of the things that I would do is make sure that Chicago Public Schools is equitable. And I think equity is providing parents an opportunity to choose what's the best route for their children. Because as a parent, I did that. I had an opportunity to homeschool, to put them in a private school. Now, I didn't get a voucher. I would have wanted one. And also neighborhood school. I'm currently right now fighting for my neighborhood school, which is a selective enrollment school, by the way, to serve the community and provide that equitable education. So I believe that education is personal. It is something that parents and their children and their families should be able to determine what's best for them, and they should be provided with their tax dollars an opportunity to go where it fits them most.
Well, I hate, thank you. And thank all the panelists. I hate to stop doing this because I got a line over there. Everything's great. Brian's looking at me with evil eyes. But I do want to thank all the panelists. I think it was a great conversation, and it was an important conversation. I hope to come back here and double the size and make more people come because it's really important. Maybe I'll invite Sexy Red next time if that's what I need to do to get more people here. But just know that we are really driven to have more of these real conversations, and that's what this conversation was. There aren't many conversations about education like this happening. Atlanta is our next one, so maybe all the people who didn't come here, they can do their penance by flying to Atlanta and going there. We're going to do more of these because I think people need to hear what the community believes. One, we all need to start speaking up, as Principal Morrow said. You're not going to get what you want unless you speak up. I am in total agreement that we need to fix the community schools, which is what got me called racist by the white liberals. But I think we need to fix the schools, but it's not the only thing we can do. I think that we can do that and have the ability to send our kids to other schools if we wanted to, and change legislation and run for school board. But we need to be educated. We need to know what's going on. And hopefully you all will leave here, share this, tell your friends and get them to be involved in education. And like the principal said, bring the community back because we have to change that. No one else is going to change it. But thank you all for coming. Sorry, Larry and all, I don't have time. We can talk when we're going to eat. We can talk out there. You are going to change the world with your response too. But thank you all.